Nakira, and I believe you're going to tell us some things that you had the opportunity to survive and some things that God did for you. So let's just hear what God did for you.
Alrighty. So thank you guys. I just want to say thank you to Pastor Wilton for providing me this opportunity. So as he said, my name is Nakira and I am a survivor and I've just survived some
Let's
things.
celebrate that.
So I feel like I'm surviving because I just started my healing journey. Um, when we hear about domestic violence and think about domestic violence, we often don't think of hope, but that is truly my story. Um, October 16, 2014, I was in a relationship, and at that time, I was with someone who I thought I loved. And I was being what I thought was supportive, and I remember being at home alone, and he's a gig worker, so he came in from an event, and he was going through whatever he was going through, and I was being what's wrong? What can I do to help you? What's
He's being
going
supportive.
on? So I thought. And in that support, he didn't want to talk about it. But I have often felt like you have to talk about it to feel better. Before you know it, he had jumped on me and choked me. And I remember in that moment just fighting him off. And I rolled over in that moment of being choked and not knowing what to do. I didn't say a thing, I didn't tell my family. And I was 26 years old at the time, and he left. And I remember just laying there scared to move. And what ended up happening is he had reached out to his cousin, who was a police officer. So it was almost like he told the police. And I just remember being like, hearing her say like he didn't know, he didn't mean to do it. And I took that and I kept it to myself. I never shared. So my first incident of dealing with domestic violence, I was 26 years old, and I didn't share with my family. I didn't tell anyone. Fast forward, I adore my family. I love my family. I do these things, these family trips, because I'm a planner, so I naturally love to plan things. So we were going out of town, and he was dealing with some things. His best friend had just moved back to Michigan. His dad had got diagnosed. He was sick, and I asked him to go. He didn't say no. And I was making a little bit of money, just a little bit of change, a little something in my pocket. So I had coordinated like all these things. So I had to have a lot of conversations. And in one conversation, he wouldn't support me. And I'm like, don't correct me, like do that in private. And I remember telling him like, I didn't like when you did that. And before you knew it, I was lifted up off the ground in front of my family that time and being choked. This was January 16, 2014. So that was the second time that we were in Cleveland. And for whatever reason, I didn't leave him. I decided to put this man in my car and drive him here to Michigan. And in driving to Michigan, I just cried because my family had witnessed something they didn't know I was experiencing. And even though I knew God was like definitely watching over me at that time because I was in a situation I should have been in. I was in sin. And, God is kind to us because even when we're not pursuing Him, He's watching over us and
Amen to that.
providing for us. So that evening, my best friend Tiffany who's here with us today. I remember like reaching out to her, like, girl, come over here. So she ended up coming over. And I'm saying to him, like, you choked me in front of my family. He said, no, I didn't. My whole family seen it. Before you knew it, again, on the floor. And I just remember Tiffany running through the door, my cousin Ebony running through the door, and they got me. And at that moment, I knew that I had to get away. I couldn't continue to stay in something that was just that toxic. And I had wanted love for so many reasons. So I do remember me asking him to leave. So we weren't in an official relationship, and he left and he went with his dad. But I was still very supportive. I was over there every Tuesday cooking for his dad. And when you deal with abuse, there's a cycle of abuse that you don't realize that
Wow.
you're in until you actually come out of it. So we're not in a relationship, and yet I get pregnant. And then I have my daughter. So July 16, 2016, I now have a child with this man who has physically abused me. And not only was it physical, but it was verbal as well. And these are things that I'm keeping to myself because I'm Nakira, always determined. I have a business. I'm a working woman. How could it be me? And I just know that it took for me to have my daughter to realize that it was something really wrong. My child was about a week old, and I was holding her in my arms, and it was new to breastfeeding. I was new to being a mom. My body wasn't mine
Right.
anymore. And I was asking for help. I'm sleepy. Help me. And he rose up on me, and the look that he had in his face with my child in my arms, I knew then that I couldn't stay any longer. So at that time, I made the decision to leave, but we had to do this thing of co-parenting. So all of these years of co-parenting and dealing with it, it was actually dealing with me, because that's when the verbal abuse started, and I wasn't enough, and you don't know what I'm doing and what I'm dealing with. And I thought that if I said nothing, it was better than saying something.
Right.
And that didn't help either, because it allowed for my abuser to determine how he wanted to treat me and what he felt like my value was. It took for COVID to come into COVID to be a blessing. And I think that more than anything, we have to reflect on what COVID did for us.
Right.
It made me sit down. It made me look at what was around me. It gave me opportunities in the time with my daughter I wouldn't have had. And I remember being with her, and he and I got into this big altercation just because I work in healthcare. So in my hospital, prior to COVID being what it was to the world, for us, we had a 18-wheeler of bodies outside. There was no room at the morgue. So I dare not let my child go into an environment where you don't think COVID is real, because I can see that it's real. We're going to believe God that he's going to protect us, but we're also going to take the provisions to be protected. So you weren't taking my baby and just being all out here in the streets. So it was a big thing, but I just felt more comfortable in not letting her go. And I was also, he wasn't married at the time, but he was with somebody who had COVID, and they didn't share that with me.
Right,
so I felt like that deceit was just me being protective of my child. So majority of the pandemic, me and Nova rocked it out in the house. I got furloughed for a month, which was a blessing too. And unemployment was
there's a
planned.
multitude of blessings that's happening here from what I'm
During
hearing.
this time,
God is keeping you.
he's keeping
How pastors
me.
say their plague is actually our miracle. So during that time of the pandemic, it actually gave you the opportunity to recognize some of these cycles and some of the vulnerability you were experiencing to kind of get away from that situation. So that's a testament within itself. You have to recognize that everything that has happened is not always happening against you. It's sometimes happening for you, right?
And during that time is when I really realized that I had to set boundaries. So it was during COVID that I really started to advocate for myself and advocate for my child. And those were things I didn't do. I was constantly on the go. I was moving. And it ended up coming
So the pandemic made you stand up in a lot of ways.
Correct, in a ton of ways. Because if you can't see, I'm 6 feet tall. So it just got me, it made me big. So I remember I set the schedule. This is what it's going to be, because I'm working from home, I'm teaching her at home, and I need help. Because as I stated, he's a gig worker. So if I work a 9 to 5, I really feel like maybe you should keep her during the day, or you should do school with her. So I had a schedule. I think it was Tuesday, Thursday, whatever the schedule may have been. And this particular day, he was supposed to come get her, and he didn't. And I remember he walked in the door, and I'm crafty. So I'm crafting in my little craft corner. And I just looked up, I said, "Why didn't you come get Nova?" And he was like, "I had to work." And I'm like, "Well, if you just told me you had to work, then I wouldn't be asking these questions." And I remember saying, "Nova, come down," because Nova wanted some food to eat. And at that moment, he was just like, "You don't communicate and you don't do this." And he was charging at me. And next thing you knew, my daughter was on the stairs and I was on the floor. And all I could remember is just hearing my child just screaming. And it woke me up, because I never said anything. My family had seen it, and we never talked about it again. And I did something that I don't typically do. I posted on Facebook, because I felt like that would have been the moment that I would not have had an opportunity to say anything again. And posting on Facebook allowed for me to start gaining my voice and having this conversation and admitting that I had been abused.
So you reached out to the community.
Yes.
In lack of better words. Isn't that powerful? Isn't that a powerful thing? Again, that's why you need to text 84576 NL Strong to be a part of the community, because everybody needs their help. Throughout the testimonies we've been hearing each and every month, you've been hearing people relying on the community. It's not happening in the building. It's happening right where you are. And that's a powerful thing. Celebrate God for that.
In her story to encourage others to take that first step and get help.
It doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in and how safe it seems. When it comes to domestic violence, it's all about what happens behind closed doors. And now a Detroit woman is sharing her story to show there can be light at the end of the tunnel.
I'm not a survivor, I'm surviving.
This is Nakira Howard. Her face lights up every time she mentions her daughter, 5-year-old Nova.
She is a ball of joy.
Their smiles are no indication of what they've been through. Listen to this statement she read to a judge as her former partner was sentenced for domestic violence just 2 months ago.
I cannot even begin to describe the feeling of falling on
onto the floor, inches away from the stairs and the TV stand, and opening my eyes to see my daughter standing there confused and scared because her father, her hero, was choking her mother.
That horrific incident happened in January 2021, but she says it wasn't the only one. They broke up in 2015, but still saw each other because of Nova, and the relationship could be volatile. Nakira said her daughter witnessing the violence was a wake-up call to get help.
I don't know if she realized that she saved me, that she saved my life.
She got a PPO right away. Then she got help from the state's Division of Victim Services, which included $2,000 for her medical bills.
As a victim, you don't know these things right offhand. These aren't resources that you have. We have those resources.
Nakira is one of the many victims of crimes who have suffered physical injury that the division helps, and they know they can help even more.
If we can connect you with a program in your area or your county, that's what we're here for.
Nakira wants victims to know they're not alone.
You are enough. You do not deserve it, and it is not your fault. Seek the help.
Nova's father was sentenced to 1 year of probation, and he still gets to spend time with his daughter. As for Nakira, she's focused on healing and making sure that Nova has a childhood that she wants and can remember. In Detroit, I'm Megan Woods, Local 4.
Hello, my name is Nakira Howard, and I am a domestic violence survivor. My first incident was October of 2014, but it would not be until 7 years later for me to use my voice. For the fourth and final time on January 28th, 2021, I was choked. My head was banged on the ground in front of my then 4-year-old daughter. I cannot even begin to describe the feeling of falling onto the floor, inches away from the stairs and the TV stand, and opening my eyes to see my child standing there confused and scared because her father, her hero, was choking her mother like he had done so many times in the past, and I said nothing. If it weren't for my child, I might not have spoken out. I might not even be here today. Having those eyes look up at me shook me to my core, and I knew that something had to be done. I started the process of pressing charges against my abuser without any guidance or any idea of what to expect. From the 911 officers that were dispatched to my home, I obtained a number to a domestic violence advocate. She would provide me the courage to start the process of protection. I was able to get a PP order in place, and by that afternoon and the following day, I found myself at the station writing my official statement. Upon leaving, a detective encouraged me to go to the hospital because the bruises and scars on my neck looked bad. The scans revealed no internal injuries, and the 2 days off of work was not considered sick leave. Thus, it would allow for me to take from my paid time off. Without wanting to lose much of my paid time off, I returned back to the office after the weekend of the incident. Navigating and attempting to understand a system that I was foreign to was something I did while working full time, and I feared falling behind on my rent. The pandemic was already true and something we were surviving, and I was too fearful to ask my landlord for any breaks during my recovery, and I pushed myself to work, even in not the best mental state. Based upon a child in common, my case was not very open and shut. I not only dealt with domestic violence court, I too dealt with PPO court and family court. My PPO protection would only protect myself, but not my child. What started in January to get my abuser convicted would end in August. Multiple hearings and working parts, he will be charged with 1 year of probation. Now, 2 months later, I use my voice and I speak for others who have started the process to get away, to seek the help, to obtain the resources. Navigating life after speaking up and realizing we are survivors and not victims, this is something we have to deal with every single day of our lives. I, and so many others, survivors, would sleep better knowing that we would have these protections provided by these bills. Thank you to the members of the House, the Progressive Woman Cacus, for allowing me to speak today.
had dealt with more of verbal abuse during the pandemic, but for him to charge me and to put his hands on me.
Nakira Howard has been there dealing with domestic violence and only got worse because she was essentially locked in with her abuser at the height of the pandemic.
It was necessary for me to get the protection not only for myself, but for my daughter as well.
Members of the House Progressive Women's Caucus unveiled a package of bills aimed at helping people like Howard get what they need right away.
These protections, whether it's job, whether it's housing, privacy rights, those are baseline protections that folks need to be able to do the work to start healing.
The bills try to prevent domestic violence, support survivors, and help protect survivors from further abuse. Since the beginning of the pandemic, domestic violence rates have soared, leaving shelters overburdened and resources stretched thin. In Michigan alone, there were more than 64,700 reported victims of domestic violence, up nearly 20,000 from 2 years ago.
I'm sure that everyone has someone in their family who has been the victim of abuse. It's such a common problem across our state and across our country and actually across the world. And so if our job as lawmakers is to ensure public safety and welfare, this is an important set of bills to support.
2 additional bills are expected to be introduced soon. One would encourage law enforcement and prosecutors to initiate victim-focused outreach with victim service agencies. And the other would let survivors know if an abuser's tether is tampered with or if that abuser comes close to a victim's home or work. Hillary Golston, Fox.
Raising awareness about new legislation that would provide support for people in a similar situation. Araceli Crescencio was there and is here for you now. Tell us more about this, Araceli.
Lauren, experts say since the beginning of the pandemic, domestic violence rates have soared. Members of the House Progressive Women's Caucus say action needs to be taken now to give survivors the support they need to rebuild their lives.
For many, being home during the pandemic was a safe refuge, but for Nakira Howard, it was the complete opposite.
With the pandemic, it revealed a lot of things within that time because we were in the house, we were with people who we thought we loved, and we could find out that it was more than just a pandemic going outside. For some of us, it was inside our homes as well.
Nakira knows she's not the only one who suffered as the state entered lockdown last year.
The bills that are looking to be passed now will be impactful for survivors to come. If these things were in place when I had my story to share or when I was going through, it would have made a big difference for me.
The legislation includes protecting survivors of domestic violence from eviction, adds stalking as a reason for survivors to use paid medical leave, and also adds privacy rights to adults, not just minors.
These protections, whether it's job, whether it's housing, privacy rights, those are baseline protections that folks need to be able to do the work to start healing.
Representative Padma Kupa says the bill package knows no bounds or parties and invites legislators to get behind it.
If our job as lawmakers is to ensure public safety and welfare, this is an important set of bills to support.
Survivors say with cases of domestic abuse on the rise, these bills could be life-saving.
You changing these laws and passing them makes a difference to not only me, but other women out there.